I'm Frank Vaughn. It's April 26, 2025, and it feels like we are inhaling a breath to hold it until the election is done on Monday. The meme on the screen that I'm starting with today is a man holding a heavy bag across his back and a child saying to him, "Wouldn't it be easier if you left that behind?" And the bag is labeled the past. There's an argument to be made that the very concept, the very idea of Canada has long since become the past, and that the future, as you now see on screen, is North America. And it's just a matter of how much time it takes to get to that future. And if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, you know that I've talked about the merits of statehood. I've talked about how the American citizen has far more rights and privileges than a citizen of Canada. We don't even have property rights. I don't need to go over it again. Maybe that is the future. But while I'm here, in spite of recognizing the flaws with this federation, the flaws of the flag itself, as I've made videos about, I find myself voting for Canada. Now, there's a lot of people in this country, millions of them, who believe that voting for Mark Carney and the Liberals is actually voting to save Canada. And you are fools. And you will be among the most disappointed with what you sow if you get what you want. He is here to end this country. It will end in many ways, but before he's done, he will have robbed you like an old-fashioned robber baron, like a looter, before what's left is absorbed by greater forces than most people can even comprehend. But what is this past, this heritage, this thing known as Canada? On screen, for those who are listening, is a display of the 2024-25 equalization payments, where the western part of the country, treated as a territory as it has been for 150 years, is looted once again for the benefit of the East to the tune of in excess of $20 billion. Also accompanying this imagery is the distribution of Senate seats. The Senate, which is appointed for life. There are 24 Senate seats allotted to the western provinces, 3 to each of the territories, 24 for Ontario, 24 for Quebec, 6 for Newfoundland, 10 for New Brunswick, 10 for Nova Scotia, and 4 for Prince Edward Island. Once again, the western part of this country is screwed. It's a wonder to even myself why it is I'd be loyal to something like this. And maybe I'm not loyal to the system. Maybe I'm not loyal to the Federation. I am certainly not loyal to the King. But I am loyal to principles and a higher moral calling. And I know in my heart of hearts that Mark Carney might be the most evil man to ever sit in the Prime Minister's chair. And I can't reward that. I can't reward the plan that he has carefully concocted and put in place. With a complete and total lack of accountability, woe to the Liberal voter if you succeed. Because what you're going to find out over the next 6 months is going to leave you feeling disillusioned, it's going to leave you feeling disappointed, and you're going to feel, even the densest among you will feel some semblance of guilt for what you helped unleash on the Canada that I think many of you love. I spoke in a recent video about my faith in the process of the conduct of federal elections here in Canada, paper balloting, hand counting, lots of scrutineers, lots of eyes on the process. But we do have this advanced voting issue, which potentially creates room for fraud, because time in an election equates to fraud. The more time ballots are held by officials, the more room and opportunity there is for manipulation. I'm not saying it is happening. I'm saying the room is created. But underneath all that, on screen is a ballot from Carleton, Pierre Poilievre's riding, with over 100 candidates represented on it. It's absurd that this goes on in Canada. The foreign interference, which we have officially recognized, benefiting mainly the Liberal Party, is ongoing. We have uncovered in the last couple weeks, a concerted effort by the Communist Party of China to promote Mark Carney's candidacy. And our media couldn't even be honest about that. So there is room for error. There is room for fraud. But the interference, the compromising of the election has already transpired, and I don't want to be mistaken on that. It comes from within the parties. Look at the Liberal Party. Look at the fraudulent leadership race they just had. It was a joke. It was a travesty of process. And it was a coronation. It was a selection, not an election. If only elections were one day, and one day alone, and you had to make time to vote in those elections or you just skipped your franchise. If only mail-in voting was secure and rare, then maybe we could have 100% faith in the entire process. But then I read this, globalnews.ca, after a record-shattering turnout during advanced polling, Elections Canada will allow some ridings to start counting ballots a little earlier. They won't disclose which ridings, but there will be voting going on at the same time as counting is happening. If that's not a great big red flag, I don't know what is. I couldn't disagree more with this, even if the intent is honest and there's no shenanigans going on. This undermines reasonable faith in the election process. And this is the issue with elections all across Canada and across the United States. The erosion of same-day elections and same-day results. The idea that counts can take 2 weeks to compile. It is just a great big open door for fraud. Mail-in voting, advanced polling. These are all weaknesses that undercut the system, and there's no need. Elections don't have to be convenient. If your schedule puts you out of the country, that's your problem. If your schedule doesn't allow you to get... We used to have rules on the book that your employer had to make time for you to go to a polling station and vote. That's all we got to do, is make it illegal for a company to punish an employee for having to go to a polling station on the day of. And if you don't make time to do it, if you don't go to the effort to do it, if every 4 years you have to drive a half hour or 45 minutes to go to a polling station and vote, and that's too much of a barrier of entry for you, too bad. You don't get to vote then. It shouldn't have to be easy. The same arguments that they deploy in the United States against voter ID, which is another area. We have voter ID. So everybody's got to verify their voting up here. It's so weird how the American left holds up Canada as this shining example, but they completely ignore that our verification system is much better than it is in many jurisdictions in the United States. But we still have a weakness, as many people have highlighted. You don't need to present proof of citizenship, and non-citizens can get the required documentation to register with Elections Canada and successfully vote. And it's been demonstrated that it can happen. I don't think it's widespread and coordinated. I don't think we're talking about hundreds of thousands of votes here. But it's a bit of a problem, especially when there are millions of people in Canada right now who are non-citizens. A lot of people. They could be participating in our elections, and we would never know it. Why? Back to the point, is Elections Canada allowing counting to happen before the polls even close? The only way that you can fail to be aware of what Mark Carney is at this point, we've read his book, we've examined him, we've looked at it from all angles. There's lots of people making content about Mark Carney. But the sad truth is we're not breaching the left because the left exists in this bubble of ignorance where they don't know who this guy is and they can just be fed a narrative that Poilievre's the great evil. Poilievre's the one that will try and save Canada. Mark Carney's the one that will end it. Believe it. This is a headline from Le Journal de Montreal. Tax avoidance. Mark Carney's firm in litigation against the Canada Revenue Agency. Brookfield accused of tax avoidance on large sums by the Canada Revenue Agency. Duh. That's what they do. That's what Mark Carney does. He works on behalf of his rich friends to not only shield their wealth from taxation, which you could argue is a good or a bad or whatever, take it off the table. He's the guy saying he's going to bring accountability to Ottawa at the head of a government comprised of the same people who have destroyed accountability in Canada potentially forever. His whole career has not just been about hiding their wealth. It's about using their wealth to generate returns. That's what Brookfield is. We've seen in the reviews that I've done of his book, which maybe I'll return to, maybe I won't, where he talks proudly about printing hundreds of billions, up to $15 trillion out of thin air, dumping it into the deposit accounts of the banks themselves, who then loan it out to you at interest and thinking that he's doing a public good, increasing the money supply, robbing you of the purchasing power of your hard-earned savings. And somehow the left in Canada is holding this man up as a hero of the little people. He has been ripping the people off his entire career. It's one of the most incontrovertible facts in the paradigm that we live in, is where Mark Carney comes from. And somehow, yet again, they've sold the Canadian public another narrative. Donald Trump's the enemy, not this man sitting in the Prime Minister's chair, who has managed skillfully, not by accident, skillfully, to avoid the appropriate financial disclosures that would show Canada just how manipulative, just how calculating, and just how conflicted Mark Carney actually is before he takes over and guts this nation. But then again, what is this nation? The headline on the screen: small-scale Alberta egg farmer arrested for selling eggs outside quota system. 5 RCMP vehicles arrived to arrest him, and they plowed him down with one of those vehicles before they cuffed him and put him in jail for selling eggs. Because Canada loves its cartels. It loves its bureaucracy. Many may remember or may not remember Montana Jones in Ontario, whose entire herd of sheep were seized and killed so that they could be tested for a disease they didn't even have. And she wasn't even compensated. Or you might remember Michael Schmidt, who was prosecuted and his life upended because he dare sell whole milk, which is sold in just about every other country in the world, but he sold it off the books. He didn't have quota, and it's not allowed for sale anyway, because Canada is a cartel nation. We're not a free society. We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional monarchy. And the Constitution is very weak. It doesn't even have property rights. And all of the rights that supposedly come down from you on high can be suspended at a whim. It makes one wonder why we hang on. What is there to hang on to? And there's other politicians in Canada who are asking the same question. The headline on the screen: Blanchett calls Canada an artificial country with very little meaning. He's saying the quiet part out loud. Quebec has known this secret since the very beginning, and they've used it to their advantage. They are the only province that has used their provincial power and autonomy to the maximum amount of leverage to extract capital from the rest of the country, to extract capital, both political, social, and economic, out of the entirety of Canada, to force bilingualism, to advance their interests. And like I've highlighted before, they can just leave anytime they want. They don't need a referendum because they're the voluntary participant. They never signed the Constitution. So he's right. Canada is an artificial country with very little meaning. And it's funny, if Poilievre came out and said this, it would be such a scandal. But Poilievre is actually championing the message of trying to save Canada and make it better. Whether he's successful or not, or he goes far enough, we can debate that all day. That's his message. Carney's message is doom and gloom. I don't know how people aren't hearing it. They gather together at his rallies and they applaud as though he's going to save something, but he has told them the truth. That Canada is in an economic death spiral. And when he sits down and he negotiates with Donald Trump, and when this country starts to fragment because of the policies that his government will implement, this same government that's been in power for 10 years, liberals will finally wake up. I've often said that a Carney victory would bring clarity to my life, unlike any that I've had before. I will know exactly what it is I need to do, and I will prosecute that duty, that idea, to the fullest extent, with the fullest of my being, for as long as I possibly can. But in the meantime, and this is something else, just to veer off sideways for a minute, doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. I see this sense of moral superiority, and I didn't really want to do it anymore because I'm all done with the PPC. Like, I just don't have any energy for it anymore. But they have this sense of moral superiority that they vote for the PPC, they'll be able to sleep at night, comfortable knowing that they did the right thing. And I think there's no justification for that, because doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. I would argue that most of the time doing the right thing shouldn't feel good. The right solution, if you ever talk to a mediator or an intermediary who's actually responsible for getting two conflicted parties to agree to something, often leaves both parties unhappy. Doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, is the only point I want to make. I don't feel super enthusiastic about voting conservative because my objectives, quite honestly, still lie at the provincial level no matter who wins. But it's not right to support anybody who enables the victory of Carney and the government of the last 10 years. And that's all Bernier does. He focuses on undermining Pierre Poilievre, the only person who has a chance, even a pathway, to defeating the current Liberal government. The media does it, the unions do it, the bureaucracy does it, the PPC does it, American media does it. Everybody wants them beat. So I'm going to do the right thing and vote for Poilievre. In the meantime, let's remind Canada before the election on Monday of just who it is we are dealing with. This is an open letter from two police officers to Prime Minister Mark Carney, and I'm just going to read it. Mr. Carney, as you stand for your first election to the House of Commons as a member of Parliament, you are also seeking a mandate from Canadians to become their Prime Minister and to lead this nation. You are presenting your financial background as the requisite and relevant experience to lead a nation without having demonstrated to Canadians your ability to tackle difficult political issues in any real capacity other than in proposed and unfulfilled election promises. Perhaps it was your lack of political and government experience that saw you mishandle the extremely serious matter with your current Member of Parliament, Paul Chiang. Liberal MP Chiang not only acted without integrity as a Member of Parliament and former police officer, but openly called for the abduction and handover of a Canadian citizen and political opponent to a foreign country that the Liberal government has criticized for human rights violations, which, by the way, Mark Carney in the debate identified as our principal geopolitical threat. What a contradiction. This unparalleled action in Canadian history was your first public test as a leader to demonstrate your respect for the rule of law and to act swiftly with integrity. You hesitated and did not publicly demonstrate the recognition of the seriousness of the offense. The Liberal Party has long espoused that they and Canada respect the rule of law. The time for you to prove this with meaningful action is now. We, the undersigned citizens, are presenting you with an opportunity to demonstrate to all Canadians that you are worthy of their support, that you are a leader of integrity, and that you respect the rule of law, and that you will always act in the best interests of Canadians ahead of partisan politics. The Liberal cabinet ministers named herein, past and present, some now working in your Prime Minister's office, have directly and by intent permitted serious breaches of Canadian law. They have failed to act on serious allegations related to national security, conducted themselves in their cabinet roles with apparent malfeasance, and as a result have ultimately placed several Canadian citizens at grave risk. After 2 years of inaction by these cabinet ministers that you now assume leadership of, several innocent Canadians have been placed at risk of direct retaliation by Chinese foreign intelligence and security agencies. Had any of your ministers acted in the 2 years prior to October of 2024, when their intervention was requested by the undersigned, they would have stopped innocent Canadians from being identified for their activities and knowledge of Canadian covert intelligence operations in China. These innocent individuals now and forever have a target on their backs unnecessarily in a war of espionage between Canada and China. We are asking you to show leadership and immediately remove the below-listed individuals from your party and or from this election. We, of course, are offering you documents, communication records, and evidence to support these claims. The named ministers past and present of concern are as follows. Marco Mendicino failed as Minister of Public Safety to act to protect Canadians abroad from potential arrest and detention, failed to respond on direction from Prime Minister Trudeau's office to address impropriety at CSIS and the RCMP, permitted breaches of law, breaches of process, and breaches of policy by both CSIS and the RCMP. Dominic LeBlanc Failed as Minister of Public Safety to address breaches against Canadians with improper use of electronic spyware by CSIS and the RCMP. Failed to address breaches of the Canadian Charter of Rights. Permitted breaches against labor unions by improper government use of spyware. Failed to hold to account CSIS and the RCMP to their restrictions of operations in sensitive sectors of national security. And failed to respond to these concerns after direction from the Prime Minister of Canada. Further did not hold CSIS to account for withholding critical national security information from an active RCMP national security investigation. Bill Blair failed as Minister of Public Safety by authorizing extreme powers for CSIS to undertake inappropriate actions against innocent Canadians, permitted breaches of the ministerial directive on national security operations in sensitive sectors, permitted breaches of the Canadian Charter of Rights. David McGuinty failed as chair of NSI COP and recently Minister of Public Safety to address improper actions of CSIS for withholding critical national security information from an RCMP investigation, failed to protect the Charter, failed to address risks to Canadian citizens abroad. And it goes on. Anita Anand, Steve McKinnon, Melanie Jolie, Arif Virani, Chrystia Freeland. Mr. Carney, you have an opportunity to prove unequivocally to all Canadians that you will place Canadians' ministerial responsibilities and the rule of law above partisan political activity. And it's signed Sergeant Peter Merrifield and Detective Paul McNamara. This is a letter that many were desperate to hide from the Canadian public because it's dutiful. One of these members, at least, is still an acting member of the RCMP, and RCMP brass is not concerned with the breaches that are detailed in the letter with the evidence, with justice. They're concerned that this saw the light of day, and they're upset that one of their members, two of their members if you count the retired one, could ever have penned such a thing. There is no rule of law in Canada. We are being ruled by fiat right now. Parliament was sent home during prorogation. We're in the middle of an election. They're using orders in council to spend billions and billions of dollars in your money. None of the ministers who have been caught in malfeasance have ever faced justice. The Prime Minister himself invoked the Emergencies Act to crush the Freedom Convoy and was found to have violated everyone's charter rights. He never faced accountability. He was eventually kicked out of office, and he has disappeared from the public eye, and there's not even a whisper about his legacy and what he leaves behind. In the wake of this election, I'm sure that conversation will kick up, but it's as though everybody has a collective memory failure about the presence of Justin Trudeau only a short time ago. What more can possibly be said about the most corrupt country in the West today? Canada. And though I am voting one more time to try and save it from this man, Mark Carney, and the forces behind him, there's a lot of work to do. And I don't know if the Conservative Party and Poilievre are up to doing it, or even if they're willing to do some of the work that's required. We'll have to look for the provinces. We'll have to look to the leadership of Quebec. Believe it or not, they've shown how it's supposed to be done. They've shown what a province can do. Why aren't the other provinces doing it? Alberta and Saskatchewan, without a shadow of a doubt, will be fighting for their economic survival. It won't just be about money. It'll be about basic survival when they force the most profitable industries in these provinces to shutter their doors in the pursuit of net zero, something that Mark Carney is doggedly dedicated to. We will have no choice but to break up with Canada. That's what's next. It might be what's next even if Poilievre wins. But what choice do we have? If the boat's sinking and you have an opportunity to get off the boat, there's a whole pile of people who want to stay on the boat because they believe it's going to keep sailing or they believe it's too beautiful to let go of. Are you going to sink with them or are you going to move on? Another way to look at this election is it's like we're all right now inside of a burning house. And there's many of us who are trying to put the fire out. We're trying to save the house. And maybe we can be successful. And it makes for good copy. It's a good story. Putting the fire out in the house. But assuming we can do it, assuming we can put the fire out in the house, we're going to walk out the front door to get some fresh air because it was a hard fire. We're sweaty, our lungs are filled with smoke, and we just need that fresh air. But once we get outside that door, we're going to realize that the forest is burning around us. We weren't just threatened by the fire that started in our own kitchen. We're threatened by the fire that is taking the world. It's a fire of change. The unipolar moment's gone. American hegemony is gone. It's been gone for a while. And now we're in the shakeup. To use another metaphor, it's like a snow globe that's been shook up. And all the flakes are settling back down. And there's a lot that hasn't been written yet. And there's nothing that is certain. There's a lot of people who engage with this idea that the future will contain all the components of the past. And they're very used to, because our frame of references are shaped by our lived experience. Everybody alive today, for the most part, has lived in the post-1945 bubble. Back to 45 is 80 years. The people who are 85, 90, 95 years old, their memories of the time before 45 are very limited. It's a long time ago. And age takes some of your faculties, at least for most of us. Our perspective is shaped by our lived experience, and the entire culture, the entire nation, those who have been here the longest, have a particular frame of reference. But if you just go back a little bit further, you get into the 1930s, you get into the 1920s, you get into the lead-up of the First World War, through the First World War, the settlements that came out of the First World War, what you would understand is that change, when it comes, is often not at the result of a vote. You don't often get your say. Czechoslovakia never got the vote on their carve-up. People say there must be referendums. The First Nations must be consulted. In the midst of a crisis where everything's falling apart around you, none of that matters anymore. When a nation dies and creates a new relationship with the world, take, for example, the American Revolution. It was a British colony. Then there was an illegal civil war, and the victors of that civil war made their cause legal with a newly constituted illegal government that stands to this day. It's legal now. When change happens, the old order gets swept away, and there's a new order. It's either imposed or it's created, but it comes. And the things that you think matter and the things that you think you're entitled to, you're not entitled to at all. And I'm just here to warn you that you live in the midst of that change. Most of it has not manifested yet. There's enough chaos all around you for you to read the tea leaves and understand what's coming. Your streets aren't safe for you to walk on. There's daylight, armed robberies. There's drug addiction everywhere. People are ruined. The birth rate is in catastrophic decline. For everybody that's worried about great replacement, you don't have to replace the population because the population is disappearing because we stopped having children. We forgot the joy of family. We forgot the joy of the future. Because in spite of it all, we still live in a great time. And maybe we're past the peak. We're over the hill. The golden age was the 1990s and the early aughties. And by the God, am I ever glad I got to see it, experience it, and live it while it was there. Because I don't know what the next 10 or 15 years looks like. The Prime Minister's office says we're all going to be hunting squirrels to survive. They say that. Carney's Prime Minister's office says we will be subsistence hunting without consulting the relevant laws and regulations because there won't be anyone there to enforce it, and everybody will be just looking to survive. That's the PMO. That's the guy that people are lining up to vote for. That's his projection of what the world of 2040 looks like. So with that being said, you better embrace some change. And you better start thinking outside the box. Because the Constitution and the Charter and the plebiscites and all the things that you think you're entitled to and all the treaties and all this stuff, it's as much wind when the whirlwind of change sweeps us all up in its grasp. It's here. It's absolutely here. And today's Saturday. Well, let's finish this way. Would you guys like a live stream election night? Is that worthwhile? Is that something you'd like to see? As I would consider doing that for this one. Usually I don't do it. Election nights, I usually like to watch the results and stay by myself, not even really social media, and not respond until the next day. But maybe this time it might be nice to do with company. I don't know. Let me know in the comments section. We're all in this boat together. Change is here. You better start thinking big. You better start preparing for the unexpected, because those are the times we live in. I'm Frank Vaughn. I'll see you in the next one.